In 2012, Toronto was shaken to its core when Emily Fraser, a young nurse, vanished on her way home. Days later, Sophie Chen, a university student, disappeared under the same eerie circumstances. As fear spread, investigators uncovered a secret basement filled with the belongings of the missing women. The trail led to Peter Halloway, a quiet city electrician whose calm mask hid unimaginable darkness. But even after his arrest, strange sightings continued. Figures in the night, whispers of movement, and the lingering presence of something unfinished. The truth behind these three names would change Toronto forever. It was a cold autumn evening in 2012 when 26-year-old Emily Fraser vanished into the quiet streets of Toronto. She had just finished her late shift at St. Luke's Hospital, where she worked as a nurse in the emergency department. Her co-workers remembered her smiling as she waved goodbye, tired but cheerful, ready to get home after a long day. Emily was known for her punctuality, and her nightly routine never changed. She took the same route home, the same streetcar, and always texted her roommate when she was on her way. That night, at exactly 11:47 p.m., she sent her usual message. "Leaving now. Be home soon." It was the last time anyone ever heard from her. The next morning, her roommate noticed Emily's bed untouched. Her work shoes were still missing, her uniform unwashed, and her phone went straight to voicemail. By afternoon, concern turned to panic, and a missing person report was filed. Police began retracing her steps, starting from the hospital and moving toward her apartment near Trinity Bellwoods Park. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The bus drivers didn't recall seeing anyone matching her description. Surveillance cameras along Queen Street had been temporarily offline that night due to maintenance. Even her phone's GPS signal had gone dead only a few blocks from her home. Later that evening, a jogger reported finding a phone lying face down near a park bench under a flickering streetlight. It was Emily's. The screen was cracked, the battery nearly drained, and a faint smudge of dirt covered the camera lens. Next to it, officers noticed faint footprints in the mud that appeared to belong to two people. One small, likely Emily's, and another larger set following close behind. There was no sign of a struggle, no dropped belongings, no trail leading away. It was as if both had simply disappeared into the night. For days, volunteers and police combed through the area. Drones, dogs, and divers searched every corner of the park and nearby riverbanks, but not a single clue surfaced. Flyers with Emily's face appeared on lampposts, coffee shop windows, and bus stops across the city. Her family pleaded on television for anyone with information to come forward. Toronto's calm streets began to feel uneasy, and whispers of something darker began spreading through the neighborhoods. People avoided walking alone after dark. Parents told their daughters to take taxis instead of the streetcar. Detectives considered every angle: robbery, abduction, even the possibility that Emily had left voluntarily. But none of it fit. Her bank cards hadn't been used. Her social media went silent. She had no history of mental illness or family disputes. Her disappearance felt deliberate, almost orchestrated. As one officer later described it, "It was like she walked into a void that night." Weeks turned into months, and Emily's case slowly faded from headlines. The police had no leads, no suspects, and no evidence beyond a broken phone and a pair of fading footprints. But late at night, residents near the park began to report strange things: footsteps on empty sidewalks, shadows that seemed to linger too long, and the eerie feeling of being watched. What began as one woman's disappearance was quietly becoming the beginning of something far more terrifying. A week after Emily Fraser vanished, Toronto was still uneasy. Posters with her face fluttered on every telephone pole, but hope was fading. Then, before the city could recover, another woman disappeared. Her name was Sophie Chen, a 24-year-old university student studying criminology at the University of Toronto. She was last seen leaving the campus library just after midnight, her backpack slung over her shoulder, walking toward the subway. Like Emily, she was alone, confident, and familiar with the area. The route she took was well lit, surrounded by late-night cafes and security cameras, yet somehow she never made it home. When Sophie's disappearance hit the news, panic spread across the city. Two women missing in the same month, both last seen at night, both vanishing near downtown Toronto. The similarities were too precise to ignore. Detectives began drawing lines on a map, marking the spots where each woman was last seen. The distance between them was less than 2 kilometers. The media started calling it the Trinity Bellwoods connection. Some said a serial predator was stalking the streets, while others whispered that something more sinister was at play. Police reviewed hours of CCTV footage from nearby intersections. At 12:09 a.m., Sophie appeared walking briskly down Bloor Street looking at her phone. The next camera should have caught her crossing the next block, but she never appeared again. It was as if she vanished between two frames. Investigators noticed something strange. In the reflection of a store window just a few steps behind Sophie, there was a blurry outline of a tall figure wearing a dark hooded jacket. The image was too grainy to identify, but it was enough to change everything. The city became a place of fear overnight. Women began traveling in groups, night classes were canceled, and police patrols increased. Journalists hunted for connections between the victims, digging into their backgrounds, jobs, and routines. Emily was a nurse. Sophie was a student. They had no friends in common, no overlapping workplaces, no shared social circles. But one curious detail emerged. Both had posted online about feeling watched in the weeks before their disappearance. Emily had written on her private Facebook, "I swear someone's been following me after work lately." Sophie had shared a similar message with a friend, saying she saw a man standing near her apartment building for 3 nights in a row. By the end of the month, 3 more women from nearby neighborhoods reported similar experiences, seeing the same figure at night, standing motionless under streetlights, always wearing the same dark clothing. He never spoke, never moved closer, just watched. The press gave him a name, the Toronto Phantom. It spread like wildfire, and soon the entire city was talking about him. Every creak, every flickering streetlight, every silhouette in a window felt threatening. Toronto had seen crime before, but nothing like this. Something that felt organized, patient, and deeply personal. Police set up a task force, promising to find whoever was responsible. But as winter settled over the city, new reports of missing women continued to surface, each one following the same invisible pattern. And behind every story, the same shadow seemed to linger, waiting for his next move. Months passed with no breakthroughs. The city was on edge, and the fear that began as whispers had grown into a constant unease. People avoided walking after dark, apartment doors were double-locked, and local news stations replayed the same haunting images of missing women every night. The police were running out of leads, until a chance discovery in early spring changed everything. A construction crew was assigned to demolish an abandoned 2-story house on Bloor Street, one that had been vacant for nearly a decade. The property had a long history of complaints. Neighbors reported strange sounds at night, flickering lights, and movement in the windows despite no one officially living there. On the second day of work, one of the laborers broke through what appeared to be an uneven section of the basement wall. Behind it was a narrow passage that led into a hidden space no one knew existed. Inside, they found 3 small rooms carved crudely out of concrete, each with heavy locks on the outside. The air was stale and damp, and the walls were covered in insulation that muffled sound. In one corner lay an old mattress with torn fabric, next to a rusted metal chair. Scattered across the floor were personal belongings: earrings, a locket, a shoe, and a broken phone screen. There were also dozens of photographs tacked to the wall, all of women who had gone missing in the past 2 years. Some were smiling, others were candid, clearly taken without their knowledge. When police arrived, they treated the scene like a time capsule of horror. Forensic teams collected fibers, fingerprints, and DNA samples. It became clear that someone had used the space for years and gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. A few sections of the walls had faint marks, like someone had pressed their hand against them repeatedly. Investigators noted that the rooms were arranged methodically, one for restraint, one for observation, and one for storage. Whoever had built it understood how to conceal noise, light, and movement from the outside world. The discovery reignited public panic. News outlets broadcasted the images of the basement day and night, calling it Toronto's House of Silence. People speculated endlessly about who could have created such a place. The idea that the city's predator had been living right under their noses made the fear feel unbearable. What disturbed detectives most was how organized everything seemed. There were notebooks filled with times, dates, and initials, each one carefully written in neat handwriting. The level of planning suggested that this wasn't impulsive. It was ritualistic. DNA testing connected several traces from the basement to Emily Fraser and Sophie Chen. It confirmed what many had already feared. They were victims of the same person. Yet even with this revelation, the investigation hit another wall. No fingerprints matched anyone in the criminal database, and no one nearby had seen anyone enter or leave the house for years. The silence around the property now seemed deliberate, like the neighborhood itself had been chosen for its ability to keep secrets. For the first time, police realized they weren't chasing a random killer. They were hunting someone who had turned abduction into an art of invisibility, someone who studied people, tracked them, and knew how to erase every trace when finished. Toronto had its first glimpse into the darkness behind the Phantom's mask, but it was only the beginning. The discovery of the hidden basement shifted the entire investigation. Detectives now knew they were dealing with a calculated predator who had spent years mastering how to disappear. The police pored over every piece of evidence from the basement, determined to find a thread that could finally lead them to the person responsible. They noticed something curious on one of the notebooks found at the scene. A faint imprint of a vehicle license number written on a torn page. It was partial, but enough to start a trace. When investigators ran it through the database, it matched a city maintenance van registered to a company contracted to work in the same neighborhoods where several victims had vanished. The van belonged to Peter Halloway, a 43-year-old electrician employed by the city's utilities department. On paper, he seemed ordinary. No criminal record, steady job, clean background checks, and polite demeanor. He lived alone in a small, aging house in the suburbs of Scarborough. Neighbors described him as quiet and helpful, the kind of man who kept to himself but was always punctual for work. He blended in perfectly, almost too perfectly. But the pattern of his service records caught attention. His work orders often aligned with the exact times and locations of several disappearances. It looked like coincidence, but the more investigators studied it, the harder it was to ignore. Surveillance footage became the next breakthrough. When detectives reviewed camera archives from areas tied to the missing women, the same van appeared repeatedly. It was always parked just outside the camera's main focus, sometimes across from a bus stop, other times beside construction barriers. The timestamps matched the last known sightings of the victims. Police secured a warrant to search Peter's home, expecting little but hoping for something. What they found stunned them. Hidden inside his basement was a locked cabinet filled with hard drives, each carefully labeled by date and street name. When investigators played the footage, they were horrified to discover hours of surveillance videos taken through windows, bus shelters, and alleyways. The recordings dated back nearly 10 years. They showed women walking alone, unlocking doors, closing curtains. Ordinary moments, except they were all unaware of being watched. Many of the faces were later identified as the same women who had gone missing. It became clear that Peter Halloway had been stalking them long before he struck. He planned every movement, memorized their routines, and struck when the streets were empty. His house also contained small personal objects, rings, wallets, and ID cards belonging to victims. Each item was stored neatly, almost like trophies. When Peter was arrested, the entire city froze. He didn't resist. He simply looked at the officers with a blank expression, as if he had been expecting it. During interrogation, he remained calm and spoke little, answering only in short, detached sentences. He denied harming anyone, insisting he was being framed. Yet the evidence was overwhelming. DNA from the abandoned basement matched his, and tire tracks outside the property were identical to his van. As news of his arrest broke, Toronto felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief. The monster that had haunted their city for years was finally behind bars, or so everyone thought. But even as Peter sat in custody, reports continued to surface of someone standing outside apartment windows late at night, unmoving, just watching. It was as though the shadow he created refused to die with him. Peter Holloway's trial began in the summer of 2013, and the entire nation seemed to stop to watch. Courtrooms were packed, and news stations broadcast live updates every hour. The evidence was overwhelming: DNA, video footage, and personal items belonging to the missing women. Yet Peter sat silently throughout the proceedings, his face expressionless, his hands folded neatly on the table. Prosecutors described him as cold, meticulous, and inhumanly patient, a man who had turned ordinary streets into hunting grounds. Every detail revealed during the trial deepened the horror: the hidden basement, the recordings, the stolen items, all pieces of a long, deliberate nightmare that had spread across Toronto for years. Despite the solid case against him, Peter never confessed. He showed no remorse, no anger, and no fear. Psychologists who examined him called his calm demeanor unsettling, as if he couldn't understand the weight of what he'd done. When asked why he had filmed and followed the women, he simply replied that he liked to watch. Those were the only words that hinted at his inner world, but they were enough to leave a lasting chill on everyone who heard them. After months of testimony, he was found guilty on multiple counts of kidnapping, unlawful confinement, and murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Toronto breathed a collective sigh of relief, believing the nightmare had finally ended. But the city's peace was short-lived. A few weeks after the sentencing, residents near Trinity Bellwoods began reporting strange incidents again. Late at night, people claimed to see a figure standing in the same places where Emily and Sophie had once been seen. He wore a hooded jacket, tall and motionless, always watching. At first, police dismissed these sightings as paranoia, a ghost born from trauma. But soon reports spread to other neighborhoods: Queen Street, Bloor, Dundas, each describing the same silent presence. Surveillance cameras occasionally caught a shadowy outline, tall and indistinct, yet never clear enough to identify. Rumors began to circulate that Peter hadn't worked alone. Some detectives quietly believed it too. A few pieces of evidence from the basement never matched his DNA: partial prints, shoe sizes that didn't fit, and traces of cigarette ash, even though Peter was a lifelong non-smoker. These small inconsistencies reopened old fears. Was there another person helping him? Or had someone taken inspiration from his crimes? Inside prison, Peter remained as detached as ever. He never asked for visitors, never wrote letters, and never reacted to the stories spreading outside. Guards reported that he spent most of his time staring at the wall of his cell, whispering to himself in short, rhythmic patterns. One night he reportedly told a guard, "He's still out there," though no one knew who he meant. Years later, the house on Bloor Street was demolished, but residents nearby still say the area feels colder after dark. Some claim they hear faint knocking sounds when the wind moves through the alleyways. Others say they see a tall silhouette vanish behind the streetlights. The case that changed Toronto forever left behind more than fear. It left a haunting reminder that some shadows never fade, and some monsters don't stop just because one of them is caught. The terror that once gripped Toronto left scars that still linger today. Emily Fraser and Sophie Chen's disappearances, and the dark secrets of Peter Holloway, revealed a chilling truth about how easily danger can hide in plain sight. While justice was served, the shadow of fear reminds us to stay vigilant, trust our instincts, and look out for one another. If you want to uncover more spine-chilling true crime stories from Canada and beyond, subscribe to Crime Diaries, hit the bell icon, and never miss a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat.